The Roman Empire did not fall in a single night. It cracked, slowly, like stone worn down by centuries of wind and war. For hundreds of years, Rome ruled the world with iron discipline. Its roads stretched like veins across continents. Its legions marched in perfect order. Its emperors believed their empire was eternal, but eternity is fragile when an empire grows tired. By the 7th century, Rome, now ruling from the east, was still mighty in name, yet hollow within. Endless wars against Persia had drained its treasury. Provinces groaned under heavy taxes. Cities whispered in languages Rome no longer understood. For example, in Syria and Egypt, farmers paid more to survive than they earned to live, while distant emperors debated theology instead of hunger. Rome still wore a crown, but its hands trembled. Then, from a land Rome barely noticed, history began to turn. Across the deserts of Arabia, a new community rose, small, disciplined, and bound by faith rather than blood. They were not driven by gold or empire, but by a belief that demanded justice, unity, and accountability. Their strength was not only in the sword, but in certainty. When they moved beyond the desert, they did not look like conquerors Rome was used to. No marble armor, no endless baggage trains, just purpose and momentum. The first clashes were shocking. Roman commanders expected scattered tribes. Instead, they faced an army that did not flee when outnumbered, did not collapse when leaders fell, and did not fracture under pressure. At places like Yarmouk, a force far smaller than the firm, not because of superior weapons, but because retreat meant abandoning belief itself. And Rome broke. City after city opened its gates, not always in fear, but in relief. For many living under Roman rule, this new power demanded less tax, allowed local faiths to survive, and punished corruption swiftly. In Egypt, for example, churches remained standing, administrators stayed in place, and daily life continued. Only the ruler's name changed. This was not annihilation. It was replacement. Rome had ruled through domination. Islam expanded through structure, law, and a sense of moral order that spoke to the exhausted provinces of an old empire. Where Rome argued endlessly over doctrine, this new civilization offered clarity. Where Rome extracted wealth, it regulated it. Where Rome ruled from distant palaces, governors were held accountable. The empire that once called itself the center of the world retreated behind its walls. Constantinople survived, but its world was gone. What Rome lost was not just territory, it lost the future. Islam did not overtake Rome because Rome was weak alone, but because Rome no longer believed in what it had become. And history always favors those who know who they are, where they are going, and what they are willing to die for. Empires fall when faith fades. Civilizations rise when purpose takes its place. History rarely announces itself with thunder. Sometimes it rises quietly in places the world refuses to see. While Rome argued in marble halls and exhausted itself in endless wars, a new force was taking shape far from imperial borders. No grand cities, no golden palaces. Just open desert, harsh sun, and a people forged by survival. Yet within that hardship grew something Rome no longer possessed: unity with purpose. This society was not bound by tribe alone, but by belief. A belief that erased old divisions, demanded discipline, and placed accountability above privilege. Every individual, rich or poor, leader or follower, stood equal before law and duty. That idea alone was revolutionary in a world ruled by emperors and bloodlines. Rome had legions trained to obey orders. This new force had people trained to obey principles. When they marched, they did not look like conquerors. Their clothes were simple. Their numbers were small. Roman scouts laughed at them until the laughter stopped. These fighters did not scatter when charged. They did not panic when surrounded. They advanced with calm certainty, as if defeat was impossible so long as faith remained intact. But the real shock came after the battles. Rome conquered by crushing. Cities that resisted were burned. Populations were enslaved. Taxes rose to feed distant wars. Resentment followed Roman rule like a shadow. This new power ruled differently. In newly taken lands, churches were not torn down. Local administrators were often kept in place. Farmers paid less than they had under Roman collectors. Justice, swift and visible, replaced endless bureaucracy. Corruption, once tolerated as privilege, became a crime. To people who had lived under Roman taxation and religious persecution, this felt less like invasion and more like release. In Syria, towns opened gates without a fight. In Egypt, communities adapted overnight. In Jerusalem, a city scarred by centuries of conquest, order returned without massacre. Rome had ruled these lands for generations, yet never truly won their loyalty. This new force did, because it offered something Rome could not. Meaning, Rome promised stability but delivered exhaustion. Rome promised protection but delivered endless war. Rome promised divine authority, but no one believed in it itself. Meanwhile, this rising civilization offered clarity. A clear law, a clear moral code, a clear purpose for life and death alike. People were not just subjects. They were participants in something larger than empire, and that idea spread faster than any army. Rome fought wars on borders. This force transformed societies from within. By the time Roman generals realized the danger, it was too late. They were not facing rebels or invaders. They were facing a civilization in motion, one that could lose a battle and still advance, one that could govern better than it fought, one that inspired loyalty instead of fear. Empires collapse when they rely on power alone. Civilizations rise when power serves belief. Rome had mastered control. This new force mastered conviction, and history once again chose conviction. Rome conquered the world by breaking it. When Roman banners arrived, they brought legions, taxes, and obedience enforced by fear. Cities that resisted were erased. Those that surrendered survived, barely. Order existed, but it was cold, distant, and unforgiving. Rome ruled through domination, and domination leaves scars that never fade. This new power chose a different path. When the gates of conquered cities opened, they were not followed by mass slaughter or cultural erasure. Life continued. Markets reopened. Fields were farmed. Faiths remained. What changed was not how people lived, but who protected them. In lands once ruled by Rome, people noticed something unfamiliar: restraint. Soldiers were forbidden from looting homes. Religious buildings stood untouched. Civilians were not enslaved en masse. Taxes were defined, limited, and lighter than before. Justice, once delayed by bureaucracy or purchased with bribes, became immediate and visible. For populations long crushed by imperial rule, this was revolutionary. In Egypt, where Roman officials had drained villages dry, farmers found themselves keeping more of their harvest. In Syria, communities practiced their faith without interference. In Jerusalem, a city that had known nothing but conquest, safety returned without rivers of blood. This was not mercy born of weakness, it was discipline born of belief. Rome ruled through fear of punishment. This new civilization ruled through accountability to law, to people, and to a higher authority beyond rulers themselves. Governors were not untouchable. Commanders were not divine. Even leaders could be removed if they failed justice. In a world where emperors lived above consequence, this idea reshaped loyalty. People did not obey because they were forced to. They obeyed because the system worked. Rome expanded fast, but it ruled shallow. This new force expanded steadily and ruled deeply. Its power did not end with armies. It entered courts, markets, and daily life. Laws regulated trade. Charity was organized. Social responsibility became duty, not charity of the elite. The poor were no longer invisible. And slowly, something remarkable happened. The empire that once called itself eternal began shrinking. Not because it was defeated everywhere at once, but because it was replaced in the minds of the people. Rome still had walls, armies, and titles, but it no longer had legitimacy. People did not rebel for Rome. They did not die for Rome. They did not believe in Rome. An empire can survive military defeat. It cannot survive irrelevance. The world had lost. The world had already moved on. Roads still stood, cities still bore on the name. But the future belonged to a civilization that conquered without destroying, governed without crushing, and expanded without erasing. Rome fell not to fire alone, but to a better order. History does not remember who was strongest. It remembers who was just. And that is how the world's last great empire was overtaken, not by annihilation, but by transformation.